We're currently standing in the bed of Desert Creek, directly below Hut Punu. Today's survey of the fire ground is from Desert Creek to the base of the northern cliff boundary. The western survey took us on to that high ground you can see over there, running from the south to the north, up through all that brown, ready to drop leaf fall. We are currently standing in what is known under the Janus system as northern riparian scrub. The survey today will take us from this southern point on the creek to a northern point at the base of the conglomerate Marimbula group cliff feature. We'll passage through Bega wet shrub, which is completely burnt out, as we were able to ascertain the other day, and up into the wet shrub forest to get an idea of what the damage is. The fire started some 47 days ago now. It is classified as contained. And on watch. But they're still working the hot spots up there, and it is still of concern. One might only hope that all the little hot spots on Punu Kurunpa itself have now managed to burn themselves out, because we wouldn't want another high wind day coming through and sparking it up again. The rainfall since the last 2.5 millimetres, we've had 17 millimetres at this spot here. The Weather Bureau is calling between 10 and 30 millimetres for us next Thursday. Let's hope they're right. Looking a little bit sorry for itself at the moment, but this is the hut's immediate pool. And the hut, with the hut being located in front of us there. A little island of green, basically surrounded by burnt ground. You can only wonder, but as I say, this has been known to happen in the past. Nonetheless, one can only wonder why Hut Punu continues to stand there. As you can see, it's burnt slowly down that slope. The main fire front has raced off down to the east on the high ground. This is the sides of the fire that are burnt down here, and they just haven't got past the vegetation, the acacias, the water gums or manuka, etc. to cross the creek. Mind you, the main fire up there where it did cross onto Punu Kurunpa, and obviously spotted in advance, went over the top of the hut into the wet shrub forest and burnt it out. Alright, crossing from the hut into the burnt ground of the Bega wet shrub forest. We'll get onto this spur line and follow it to the base of the Wadbilliga group cliff feature. The slender tea tree that formed the middle horizon in this area of Bega wet shrub has pretty well been killed off. It's just stems. The Angophora and the river peppermint will survive, no problem. But the main thing to note is that the lower horizon has been completely decimated. Nothing left. This tree here is in the Bega wet scrub forest and hinterland wet shrub forest biocline. Took a long time to work out what it was. It wouldn't drop any of its buds or nuts. I knew it was different to everything else, and finally a branch was broken off by something, possum or something, and it came down, and woe behold, we discovered we had a eucalyptus angophoroids, Angophora-like. It's the only one we've found on the place, and it survived. Wombat scat been dropped on top of the fire, but it'll be a good week old. But they're on the move, that's the main thing. The only animal that poops square poos, angular poops through a round orifice. We've now climbed up into, and we'll stay now to the base of the cliff in what was wet shrub forest. Slender tea tree still a dominant in the middle horizon. Everything on the lower horizon incinerated. We have a mixture of white stringy bark to the front, plenty of Angophora floribunda, and what have we got here? Silver top ash. And of course we'll start to get the black she oak in this area as well. This area should be heavily covered on the lower horizon with bracken and other herbs. Gardenia, you name it. So having moved into this zone of hinterland wet shrub forest, we're simply left to contemplate what some future may hold for it as it re-establishes itself through its successional sears back to what was slowly becoming a climax forest, since being severely affected by post-European methodology. When it was fully in its original condition, inspecting different species, particularly of the upper story, meant getting right under them and looking up at them and hunting out nuts and what have you to try and identify them. Now that it's been opened up by the wildfire and I'm seeing clearly through at the full trees, I'm recognising far more silvertop ash in here than I previously understood it to be. A lot of fall still coming down since the fire. This just happens to be another silvertop ash. A lot of trees hung up. They'll be coming down for a while yet. And they don't call them widow makers for nothing. You've got to be careful. Difficult walking, which brings to notice the next potential disaster that could hit Punu Kurunpa is heavy rain on this degraded granodiorite, forming the soils here. Highly erodible. Heavy rain would be a disaster. We need gentle rain to encourage the lower story back to hold all this. If it pours heavily, it will move a lot of this down. More evidence of the shrub, the middle story shrub of this hinterland wet shrub forest being destroyed. This is the remains of G-bung. It won't come back. It's gone. It's been too hot, been cooked. And there is a what was a black she oak, distorted in its canopy growth, but that by the vines you can see that entangled it and grew through it. From what I'm looking at, I'd say it was milk vine, but who would know? It's just the burnt off remains hanging out of the tree. wombat. The litter there is fresh fall from the fire. This was used prior to the fire. Inside is, I can see, is fairly fresh. Would have been a middle-aged wombat. One wonders where it's headed for now. It's nothing here for it. Being a small one, probably it will have to go down and compete with the larger wombats holding the favourable territory on the lower ground. Well, that fooled me. It's two choppers. One to the west, one to the east. Patrolling the fire front. Also looking for hot spots. They got the cameras going probably. Oh, we're going to have a look in here. We've got one looking, one coming through with the bucket. Empty bucket. No sign of any fire on our little walk today, thankfully. It would appear we have blackout on Punu Kurunpa at least. At this elevation, as I look around, you'll notice that much of the upper story has also been taken out. Burnt right down to stumps in many places. Let's hope it's just an isolated little area. It looks like it might be. Unfortunately, it's not just an isolated little patch. On this slope, the fire's been at its hottest just here. It has really caused some damage. These trees have been killed outright. So basically in this area here, we will have lost the upper, middle and lower story. But having come up the centre part of the western parts of Punu Kurunpa, it now confirms that the hinterland wet shrub forest mosaic on Punu has been completely burnt out. Completely, none of it was spared. And probably we're sitting here at the moment in an area where it burnt through at its very hottest. This is an old stag that's come down, climbing up through here. You look at all the old growth with its hollows and the dead stags. That's a dead stag still standing there, but live stag's gone. Particularly the parrots, lyrebirds. At the time the fire came through, they would have already been in their hollows. If not sitting on eggs, they would have had hatchlings. Some would have even had fledglings. They would have been left with no option but to take wing and leave their young. That would have included the wedge-tailed eagles that nested just over the back of the rise behind me. The imperative for wildlife at such times is for the aves is to take wing and clear the area. They can always come back and nest another clutch out later, if indeed they can find the hollows. It's a slow climb for this old bloke, but the cliffs are just behind me now, not far. Within the mosaic of plant communities on Punu Kurunpa, we've just moved into the area of another interesting one. Trees such as this here these are in fact broadleaf peppermint. You can see another one there, and they look like they've survived the fire quite well. Good to see. And I say with these broadleaf peppermints, which we don't have too much of on the southeast, I'm informed by the boffins. But what is also pleasing is that I'm now sitting in amongst the middle story of blueberry ash, still here with its leaves on and not looking cooked. In other words, it'll come back. So the middle story just here will come back as well, quite readily. This surprises me because the fear of my own ignorance, worried the cliffs are just there, that because the fire had come in from this direction in front of the camera now, towards us, the radiated heat would have built up in front of the fire front as it raced up this slope, and my fear was that the cliffs, the sheer rock face of the cliffs behind us, which in places are 9 metres high, would have radiated heat straight back at these species here, particularly these broadleaf peppermints, and cooked them for sure. But of course they're still carrying a green canopy up there, and this is the nature of wildfire. Really good to see so much blueberry ash surviving, because down in the lower areas where I'd expect to find it, it's not there. There's just the light ash traces of their having fallen and incinerated on the ground. A little like the photographs you see after the Hiroshima atomic bomb of the Second World War, leaving just the shadows of people on the ground. Dust. And here's an example of the folly of humankind. I warned earlier about the widow makers and being careful. I just got my water out to take a drink and looked up, and be buggered if I haven't planted myself directly under a hung up stag that's been burnt, blown, and it's only just being held by these trees here. There you go. There you go, spotted a bit of life here, bit of fungi. Thought I'd better find out why. And we have wet ash here. It's ash all the way down, but that's a soak from the cliffs just here. Life has to start somewhere. This alcove-like portion of land that is known as Punu Kurunpa is alcove-like into this forest terrain of the Desert Creek catchment. The forests either side used to be forestry until the 90s, and then in the forest agreements of the time, these areas were passed over to national parks under the Southeast Forest National Park system. So either side of us became the Southeast Forest National Park Bemboka section, which is hinged directly onto the Wadbilliga National Park. The last big fire to come through like this one was when it was under the care of forestry. It was a similar sort of fire. It was in 88, 89. I had a friend that was actually involved in work for forestry and was involved in coming out and trying to do something about it when it burnt through at the time. It followed a similar path. It came from the west-northwest. It came through on this opposite ridge line here, did exactly what it did this time, burnt straight through to where it took out houses down further. Those houses weren't there at the time. The Punu Kurunpa was basically spared. It didn't jump the creek. Down below us here in the hinterland wet shrub forest that we've walked through today, it did spot fire in, and I found the old scar marks, etc. were evident, but it did not burn through as it has this time. What it did do was roar down that other side and through the dry shrubby forest at the top of the cliffs here. These cliffs served, I could tell by the scarring, they served as a natural fire break. Any spotting that came over fell into what was at the time fully functional hinterland wet shrub forest, and it just didn't catch. The spot fires burnt themselves out. Although up on top there it burnt right through. The other occasion that fire came through here was in around about 2006. Parks had a hazard reduction burn on the dry forest type up there, and likewise all the cliffs here are a natural barrier. The fire did spill over the edge. It came down and landed in amongst this the debris at the bottom of the cliff here and did a bit of burning, but it never got a hold and didn't burn down slope, it just put itself out. The survival of these huge broadleaf peppermints here is testimony to the fact that this area has not suffered much wildfire, and even now, as said earlier, I'm surprised that even though badly scorched, the middle story is still in existence. Blueberry ash, black she oak, quite a few other species in amongst it, a little bit of acacia. Very interesting. My fear had been that the heat, because it had come from the other side and had burnt up through here, the radiated heat would bounce off the wall, come back and really cook this area, but it hasn't. The cliff face once again seems to have protected the forest. I'll leave the reasons why to the boffins, buggered if I understand it. But as I say, these old trees bear testimony to the fact that that seems to be the norm. Whereas if you go 300 metres downslope from here, you get back into that country where even the upper horizon had been left as nothing but stems, like the middle horizon further down. So all in all, this fire's been a bit of a new experience. But that seems to be an indicator of what might be the future. Fire behaviour seems to be changing. This one, we had snow up on the escarpment, and it continued to snow, while down in here burnt as though it was mid-fire season, midsummer. Under normal fire conditions, I would have stayed with the hut. But I knew the minute I heard about this one that I wouldn't have. I would have packed up and run. Anyway, having got myself up here, I now got to get myself back down. And the way that degraded granite right down there is, I basically need a pair of skis to do it. I'd say most of the trip will be on my bum. But I had to come up here. I had to inquire as to what had happened. And as they say, what is life if not a journey of inquiry?